how can we think about where they are at that moment or in their kind of life state and use our technology to offer them either a solution or something that just enhances their everyday. I also thought Howard and Jeff Bezos alike at Amazon cared about every customer.
How are you making decisions on the higher level in the organization around these?
I think one of the things that I did learn in my time at Nike as well was NPS as a whole, as you kind of go into, it's a bit of a blunt instrument. Fundamentally, all of us have to care about the customer in order for it to work.
Welcome to the Experience Edge, the podcast where we dive deep with industry leaders, pioneers, and CX experts to explore what it really takes to create meaningful customer-centric business impact. My guest today is Deborah Honig, and she's an accomplished leader in customer experience, brand innovation, and currently driving Samsung's vision for a connected customer-first future in the UK. In her role, she orchestrates Samsung's diverse product and service ecosystem. And here's what I love, merging cutting-edge technology with emotion. And we're going to dive deep into this today. She is tasked with defining Samsung's brand purpose for the UK, and today she's pioneering ways to enrich how people live, engage, and connect. Her career began at McKinsey, and from there she advanced to leadership roles with some of the world's most iconic brands like Nike, Amazon, Marks & Spencer's, and Starbucks. Her experience spans developing brands, creating transformative customer value props, and building retail strategies that use data and technology to really meet customers where they are. So we're going to cover a lot today, and I couldn't be more excited to have you here, Deborah. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
I want to start with diving into the broader topic of customer centricity, but just setting the stage a bit for this conversation, because you've been at some of the most iconic brands like Amazon, Nike, Starbucks. You've worked with Howard Schultz, inspiring the community strategy. What did that teach you about customer centricity? And maybe Starbucks isn't the right example. Maybe another one comes to mind better. But what about customer centricity is it that you took away from that made you into the chief customer officer that you are?
Well, I think actually Starbucks is a great example, but I would say consistently across the companies that I've worked for, customer centricity has been really key to their success. And they have done it in different ways, and I've been part of that transformation. So I think it has fed a lot into what I'm bringing here to Samsung today. Starbucks, as you mentioned, and Howard Schultz was a great formative experience for me, because Howard himself kind of really believed that it was not just about selling a great cup of coffee at Starbucks, but it was about creating a place for our customers and for the community to connect, and then to have really engaged partners, baristas, that connected with that community, and that was just as important as the cup of coffee and the quality of the coffee that we were serving. He brought that to life in so many different ways, right? Which is part of the job as when we're thinking about organizing around the customer. He brought that to life in making sure that he had really engaged, happy and well-trained and interesting partners and baristas working there. And he did that with one of the first benefits programs in the US for part-time workers and supporting people going to college. So you can imagine what that did for the community of people he had working and engaging with his customers. He also did that by empowering roles like mine at the time, which were about thinking about what does the community of our and the consumers want from our stores, and then using technology, funny enough, even back then, so I'm going to age myself or date myself, back in 1999, thinking about things like, if connection now means internet connectivity, we rolled out together the first public Wi-Fi service across all the channels and across all our stores in that era, which was, quite bleeding edge at that time. I know now that seems a bit laughable, but that was all with this idea that connectivity now became not just in person in the shop, but connecting someone else potentially elsewhere in the country was part of the future of it. And it also showed, already taught me the number of different ways and elements you had to pull together to really deliver that kind of mission. Kim and other leaders really did a great job of always being close to the customer. So, Howard as a person and all of us, as we joined the company in whatever position you were, spent time working in our stores at that time and in the front line, and then later adopted stores. So I was in the stores for over a month as I started as a director at the company, and then spent time in the stores. And that meant I was close to the our team, our colleagues, and the baristas and the customers every day. So actually, when I came back into head office to think about what we were doing, it was really much more grounded than it otherwise would have been. So some great lessons learned from him early on.
So the formative experience is really brought back to like being there with the team, serving coffees, making coffees for customers, and actually like being in the weeds. Were there other formative moments, or was this more like because of the vision, because of the customer centricity, like being there immersed in the work that was formative to you? Or were there other moments where like, okay, this is from here I'm thinking differently about it?
Yeah, I think that definitely there were a lot of periods there. I think we are at that point too. If you'd say one of the things I've always been really passionate about is how do we use technology to improve what we're doing? And that started at that point and continued on. So while I was at Starbucks, one of the things we knew was that, certainly in the morning, and today that's modern life all day, people were in a rush. So we already started to do things like use technology, not only to do connectivity, but already start to pilot things like mobile ordering, which again was really bleeding edge at that time. But if you look at it today, it's one of the things that powers, Starbucks worldwide, which is being able to like order if you are on the go, to be able to place your order, an order you already know, and have it ready for you to collect as you leave. And it's a foundation that underpins even the loyalty program they use, which is one of the biggest loyalty programs in the world. Already then we were playing with technology to power the ideas we had and take it into the future. And that transcended, and I've got to do that in quite a few places. Of course, Amazon seems like an obvious because it's more technology focused, but fundamentally, Amazon is a retailer, right? And it just happened to be that it was built online and digitally before anybody else, and that what that is its presence. But Amazon is another great place where the whole model was centered around how do we work back from the customer, and everything we did had to add value to the proposition that we set out as a business for the customer, which was to create, the world's best retailer and shopping experience with amazing assortment, the best selection, the best convenience, right? That was certainly how we worked. I mean, it even flowed through to if you ever wanted to surface an idea, it always started with writing what a customer would say about it, and then working back into the more business and technical pieces of it. So what are you actually delivering? And you couldn't actually even get an idea heard if you didn't start there, which you could imagine how critical that kind of approach is to actually getting everybody on that same page, which is if you're not improving the customer. I also thought Howard and Jeff Bezos alike at Amazon cared about every customer. So, this idea that, if a customer had a problem, we should be solving it and finding ways to make sure that problem didn't happen again for more customers. So that mental model actually, I think, was quite formative to me, where I know when I entered some other businesses that I worked for later at the start, they kind of ignored small problems and looked at the bigger ones, bigger volume ones. And something I learned quite early on was not that you can solve every small problem automatically, but that there's a lot of insight that you can get from those, and making sure you have systems in place that allow you to start picking up from those and recognizing every customer does matter. So we need to make sure that they're happy.
The thing that I like about what you're explaining here, like when you think about customer centricity as a concept, everyone has ideas about it, everyone has what the business should do about it, but in the companies that you've worked at, there was a very intentional way of what customer centricity means. Like Amazon is famous for like lowering prices and increasing assortment. That is what customer centricity means. So if we now look into your world today, when I was doing research for our conversation, a theme came up, and I think it was even the headline of one of the articles, is like under Deborah's leadership, Samsung is helping to blend technology with the emotive. And I think if I hear what you're explaining from your past roles, it's like that's been the theme of your entire career, using technology and the emotive. Can you elaborate on what that means and how that differs for how Samsung is thinking about customer centricity versus maybe like an Amazon, even though that customer centricity is the same, working backwards from the customer? Like, what does it mean to you to blend technology with the emotive?
I think the emotive piece is making sure that actually we think about what's the role we play at Samsung in someone's life, and what's the role we can play, and how can we think about where they are at that moment or in their kind of life state and use our technology to offer them either a solution to a problem they have or something that just enhances their everyday. And so I think thinking about it that way, at our level means thinking about how do we communicate the benefits of the products we have in a way that makes sense. I think a great example of that this year is, we've had a phenomenal year. It's been an amazing time for me to join and be at Samsung because we rolled AI-enabled benefits out across our entire product portfolio this year in a way that has increased both the level of intelligence our products have, but also their connectiveness. And what that's meant is that we can actually offer a lot more to customers than we've ever been able to offer before in terms of how they live at home and accomplish the things they want to do there, and how they live and work and, run a business or run a marathon, right? And so we cut across, we have a broad portfolio and we've really upped the game on what we can offer. And the job has been, if you think about it, yes, I think Samsung at the global level has been thinking about customers and innovating for decades and decades. What we now have to do here and what we're really focused on is how do we take those innovations and really think about how customers can bring them to life, use them in their everyday and communicate those benefits, one, at the beginning. But also if you think through the whole journey, how do we make sure then when they get those products, they really know how to use them? We make getting that benefit truly simple and setting up their home or setting up their device so that they get that. Because as you and I know, a lot of people can buy a product and use, certainly we see it sometimes with mobile phones, they can use like 1/10 of its potential, even less of its potential to do the job it can do. So I think for me, part of it is, if I go all the way up, is making sure that we can communicate that message in a way that's really relates to a customer, relates to where they are, and helps them understand the benefits of what the product brings and the product they have and how to use it. And we launched a campaign as a great example called You and AI as One this year. And that was really putting all of that into the context of a British family, actually a number of British families living their life with this new technology and seeing how they used it to help them manage the ups and downs and the everyday moments and really show how it could give them an extra pair of helping hands, which resonated really well in that journey. So that's definitely one part of it. I think there's another piece. We've had a technology called Smart Things, which is a platform that helps connect your devices and helps you manage your home and manage your devices. And we've always been focused on having that really open platform that allows you to connect not just Samsung devices, but other devices in your home. Because again, to us, what matters is the customer gets the most out of their home and can connect both ours and everybody else's products into that. And the great part about that has been that this year, again, in terms of thinking about the customer, we've spent a lot of time focusing on teaching and sharing the benefits of that and how that powers things that we know customers care about. For example, cost of living crisis, energy. That tool can now really help customers save energy. We know we did a whole piece of research on the sort of domestic burden and how much mental capacity is being taken up at home trying to manage the modern life and juggle the home. So what do? We're really focused on, okay, how do we help people use this technology to get time back and make that burden easier? So again, step by step, understanding where the consumer needs are. How does our technology play a role? How do we communicate that in a way that's really simple and relatable for our customers?
So you mentioned getting time back. Is that then the foundational insight that you uncover and then organize your AI solutions or the journey that you're seeking to serve your customers with around? Is that something that it's obvious and we're going to do it anyway? Or because at Starbucks, for instance, like talking to people all the time, like you mentioned, being at the front line, right? Helping your customers get what they need is way easier than I think in Samsung's context, where you have so many different products, so many different services, so many different customer types. So How did you get to an insight? It's like people really want to save time, and that's the role we can play as a technology company serving our customers. Like, how do you get to that insight? It sounds obvious, but maybe it is, maybe it isn't. How do we think about that?
I mean, I think there's a few insights that power it. We definitely know that if we can solve things around productivity, connectivity, and creativity, then our products, and we can do that probably better than most because we have such a broad array of products that filter into your day-to-day life. So that is what's exciting about working for a company like Samsung. So we really, I think, we recognize those are the areas that matter most to people, because whether you're living your life at home, as I said, or you're running a business or running to work, or you're designing as part of that something, or you have life and fitness goals, which we know people, that is a really important part of managing your well-being in this busy modern world. And so we know those three spaces are the areas that people really care about. And within each, time is really what's many people feel is a hindrance to what they can do as well. And so we focus on making sure that we deliver, the benefits of our products in that capacity so we can improve those three areas. And AI is a great example. It's like AI for AI's sake isn't really that relevant, or even just to talk about AI to a consumer. But AI is helping us deliver different benefits, and that's what we like to focus on. As you said, like time back, save energy, save money in the cost of living crisis, help you balance and juggle and be able to, do your most productively, enhance your creativity, as you know, especially if you take the younger generations and frankly the not older generation, but probably my generation. A lot of people have a side hustle or multiple things that they're doing, and just having tools to help them do that is really important to the.
Yeah, I think you're right. Where AI is becoming almost invisible. It's like it's just part of the technology that we're using. Like if we are seeing other research coming out on Gen Z using it in their work, even like as a normal thing, where maybe like older generations are, we're gonna add AI to something, and that's exciting. So the younger generation are way faster in adopting these things. But what I find interesting is understanding a little bit how you're organizing then around these concepts of productivity, connectivity, and understanding how your role as a CCO, you have marketing, you have CX, there's different teams that all need to understand like the customer from the same way. How have you found organizing your teams around this work well in the context of a company like Samsung?
I think it's a great question, because we could probably organize a number of different ways, and we probably will over time. But at present, as you know, I was the first role of this kind, and most of our roles in Samsung prior were organized around our product divisions. In creating a role like this, we brought some functions together centrally. But what we also did was try to create a framework where we empower every function and every part of the business to ladder up to the same thing. Because fundamentally, all of us have to care about the customer in order for it to work. Right. So I think that's one thing that's really important. So I like to think that everybody owns the customer, from top to bottom, and that our function or my role is to help set that strategy, but also then run a set of functions underneath that will help power that. But I alone and my team alone can't do it. So that's one thing that's, I hold true. And that's why I say how you organize, and probably in different companies, you can organize under a role like mine with different parts. And that works as long as you are setting that foundation, creating the objectives, the key initiatives, and sort of the KPIs you're going to use to measure success, and that other people can ladder up too. I think you're doing a great job by doing that.
If you're enjoying this conversation, don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast channel and leave a review. It makes all the difference. The Experience Edge podcast is where I interview business leaders, CX pioneers, and the best designers who share their insight on creating business impact, having an edge on the customer experience. If you want more exclusive content and behind-the-scenes access, check out the Experience Edge podcast on YouTube and LinkedIn so you don't miss a thing. Now let's get back to the conversation. Is the framework, when you say framework, because you mentioned objectives and key results, is it like an OKR goal-setting framework? Is it an organizational principle? When you say framework, like what do you mean with that?
I mean, I think people can use lots of different ones. I love OKR, so I tend to, whether I use the word OKR or not, I tend to kind of structure things around that. But I think as long as you've agreed a set of goals or objectives and you're really clear about what you're doing against them in the short term and the medium term and how you're going to measure success, you're fine. And so if people use other frameworks around that I'm very open to, and I have in different organizations. I think the other piece that I think we've really focused on is making sure that we have a really visible and collaborative roadmap against the different initiatives that we're working on. And I think we come back to, in the simplest of forms, just saying, okay, one, how do we create more value for the customer out of the tech they buy from us and the relationship they have with us, like as a philosophy. I think two is, you then always often look at, okay, where are the pain points? What are the biggest pain points today? And how do we make sure we're putting our best foot forward to resolve those quickly? And then three, I probably would say the area we then go to is, how do we use, like AI you mentioned today, how do we use technologies to automate things so that they are, one, we can get more human time out of them, so we can move that time to things that fundamentally we want to just put more human engagement against and human time against. And two, they're just more dynamic, right? And that's what things like AI help us do, right? The combination of some customer insights, customer user data and journey data, plus the AI technologies, is allowing us to do more of that than we've ever been able to do. I think the trick now is, we pilot quite a few of these things, but the trick is really being able to start to scale that across our customer touch points and through our journeys. And that's all the way from awareness at the beginning. And importantly, as I said, for us, especially given the life cycle of our product, unlike a coffee or, something more perishable or frequently consumed, the lifestyle of our product is longer. And so we really have to care about, and we do care about, how people and what they get post-purchase in terms of their usage and their engagement with us. That's really important.
If you think about this is like the highest level journey that you have, right? The customer life cycle. And you mentioned like the customer journey. What I'm seeing a lot of the larger companies do is start to reorganize around the notion of a journey. But what it means is different to different people in your organization, what level you are, what level of abstraction you are. If you're in marketing, you think, oh, it's my marketing funnel, but then from left to right. So journeys are this word that we can use for all these ways that we understand the customer. Is there a way that you find useful how to organize all these different journeys into, let's say, the customer lifecycle or the consumer lifecycle? And is there like a standard model that you use to understand how those pain points bubble up to the strategic initiatives that you are deciding on with your team? Is that something that you have figured out from an organization perspective? Is that what you're saying? Or is this information? I'm really curious, like, how are you doing this at scale?
I don't think there's like a silver bullet, again, like everyone's always looking for how you do it. I think you need to map, core consumer journeys. I think you have to recognize that there'll be complexity in that depending on your business model, and then devolve different elements of that to different parts of the organization to tackle, right? So I know that sounds quite academic what I've said, but like if you think about our business, we are a business with a lion's share of our business goes through third-party retailers, and we do have a direct business as well, both digitally and physically. But we want to make sure that when someone interacts with us and post-purchase, they can interact and come back to us. And so we need to manage journeys that start somewhere else, even go through purchase somewhere else, and then come back into Samsung to get the relationship and the connectivity and support they need, as well as things that start in our direct channel, whether it's online or physical, and manage that process through. So we have quite a few, and I think quite a few retailers today would have that. So not only are you managing an omni-channel presence, but you're also managing the fact that we're not the direct retailer for a large share of our purchases. There's other retailers with their journeys and how they're managing customers also involved. So that means that we just have to set the standard high. We need to make sure communication and the tools we put out on our direct channels can serve both. That's what we think about. And I think also we know, people are more digitally engaged at all levels, and particularly post-COVID, but in particular the younger generations, which means that we have to be able to support them across more channels like social and social commerce, chatbots, email. You have to be able to support them across multiple ways that we probably wouldn't have had to do 10 years ago. And so just making sure that we can get a consistent message and support whatever those channels are that they engage with us on.
So this is on the micro level, is almost like what channels are people using? There's thousands of the same journey happening in all these different variations. People switch channels, use different apps or devices to connect with you and your team, or not even with Samsung, but with your ecosystem. But when we bring it all the way up to your level again, how do decisions get made around what are we doing for the customer? What are we not doing for the customer? Like from your OKRs or from all the initiatives that bubble up through all these different teams and the partners and the distribution motions that you're having, how are you making the trade-offs? Like, what are the things that you're doing to make sure that everything that you are doing is for the customer, and the things you're not doing is maybe also for the customer, but for different reasons not relevant? How are you making decisions on the higher level in the organization around these?
Yeah, I think that, again, is like it at the highest level, it goes back to what we talked about before, which is making sure that each thing we're doing is actually delivering value. And again, no longer can you say it's going to deliver value in 3 years. We used to be on those kind of timeframes, admittedly, when we were building roadmaps, certainly when it came to building omni-channel services and improvements to CS and CX. Now it's like, can it deliver value for a consumer in a much shorter period of time? That really drives thinking. And, is it, as I said, a key pain point that we know, and we have the data and insights across our journeys to know what those are and to continue to update those and see if we're working against and solving those. And so we do track that quite quickly and quite continually. And then that last point is it like fundamentally, I believe with the technology, we need to be automating things that can be automated and freeing up time to put those people's times into the problems that are more complex and that really do need a human interaction. And so in an era in particular where we're all under pressure to continually be more efficient, right, and manage costs, especially as the investment in tech goes up, you need to actually be automating to allow us to have people to interact directly when it needs to be on things that need direct interaction with human beings. And so that's kind of the 3 ways that I'm continually working with how we prioritize our work and how we leverage technology, like the new technologies to do that. That's really important. But I think the other thing I think about also is that you've got to continue to reassess what you've put there, because things are changing so fast. Not only technology, but kind of customer expectations are high, but also how they're engaging changes. And so I think, again, I would have said, we would have presumed that it's all about speed, efficiency, convenience coming out of COVID, right? Everyone wants digital interaction, super fast, as much as they can, as quick as they can, with less, almost less engagement in some senses. And what we know now already is actually it really depends. It's not that it's a different consumer, it's a different consumer moment. And that same consumer will want really efficient, convenient, quick purchase and no interaction on some occasions. And other occasions, they're in a completely different headspace. And we need to be able to support that. They're in an awareness journey, engagement with the brand and with our products, maybe not even in a purchase mode. They're long before a purchase mode. And we need to be able to do that. And if I had said, well, no, that customer, which we might have said last time, is in quick convenience, and that's the only way I'm going to serve them, and I can't pick up on the signal that they're somewhere else, then I also will run into a problem. And I think that's more the reality of where our consumers are today. In addition to the fact that while digital channels used to be used for convenience, in particular coming out of COVID, they're also now used for that other shopping experience I just talked about. So just because it's digital doesn't mean they want convenience. It might mean they want to engage deeper and have a different experience with you. So again, some of these assumptions we would have had based on past learning or coming out of COVID, we have to be careful of, because they've changed quite quickly. And we've seen that just by the way our consumers are engaging with us on our digital channels and on our social channels, which means we have to step back and think, is how we're focused on our capability build out adapting to that versus just making sure we're as fast and convenient the next day and everything's slick, right?
You make it sound very easy, Deborah. And when we were chatting before the show, when we were doing introductions, that you also mentioned this, right? It's sometimes very obvious what you have to do, but it's really, really hard in practice. Can you speak a bit about that? How you're thinking about it?
Yeah, I think why it's hard in practice and why I said that is that because you need to, I think there's so many levers that you're pulling across the organization that as something shifts, you've got to be able to figure out quite quickly what are all the different dimensions that need to shift, get everybody back on board and adjust in a really effective way. And that's kind of a cycle of thinking and then planning and re-executing that most people aren't used to unless they kind of were brought up, I'd say, more in a kind of traditional STEM or, coding environment, right, where you're working in scrums and you're moving quite quickly. So I think getting a whole organization, especially as you make this job, which it should be the whole organization, getting the whole organization to be able to respond to that in lockstep is much harder to do than it is to say. And as I think the trick to it is just, again, going back to just being really focused on the most important things that you need to adjust in the short term, and then having an agile enough process and way of building out capabilities that allows you to flex. It's kind of that difference between building a skateboard and enhancing it versus waiting 2 years to have the full, I guess Rolls-Royce or a bigger car built before you can get any value out of it. Because by the time you finish producing that, you've probably built the wrong car, right? And then fundamentally keeping the voice of the customer in that conversation, however you do it. So at Amazon, as I said, it was about writing this PRFAQ where we wrote about the customer and the customer response, and they were always in the room. However that fits for the culture of business you're in is your job. I think our job's to make sure that happens. That could be different flavors, right? That could be getting on the front line as a barista with Starbucks. For us, we've got experience stores, we have call centers. I go out with the service vans and, meet in customers' homes. Like, there's lots of different ways you can do it, and it really depends on, I think, your business.
Is there an equivalent of the peer FAQ that you're using at Samsung right now? Do you have a process like that?
Yeah, we don't call it peer FAQ, but we do often write in terms of what do we say to the consumer like how do we communicate this to consumer? And in so doing, you evaluate whether it's are we serving the consumer? Is it a weak concept? Are we really doing something different? I think at Samsung, a lot of the way we also put that bar on there is we talk about never been done before, but that's just how do you raise the bar on we've never done it so well before attitude to how we add more value to our customers.
So you're writing backwards. You're starting with like, hey, this is what we would like the customer to read, to see, to hear, and then basically thinking about like, is that good enough?
And certainly in our functions, that's great because, as I said, we cover communications through to other projects that cut across the business. And it is actually, I've found, one of the most powerful ways to get the rest of the business to jump in on board and really support projects. Because, of course, in this type of role, you have a number of things that you do directly, and then you have a number of things you have to do, which is to get other people on board, both spiritually, and also financially with their budgets to help lift and shift across the organization. And here we find putting it in that context is really what's working for us. And it is, a trick I learned, I guess, not a trick, but a method that I learned from, my days in other organizations like Amazon and Starbucks. And I would even say just making sure that I think one of the things that I did learn really in my time at Nike as well was just making sure you're thinking about the person, like the whole customer, and as much as you can putting yourself in their life to come up with the solution rather than thinking product out. And I'm sure you saw that from the huge, amazing rise of Nike over decades. around putting the athlete at the center and then serving the athlete, whether you're an everyday athlete that runs the city or you're a professional athlete. I think that was really the way we did it there. And that allowed us to really expand both the product and service we offered, but also how we engaged with our customers there.
Yeah, looking from the outside in on a company like Nike, that was obvious in hindsight, but it also seems like right now they've lost their touch. And it looks from the outside again that the reason is because they were organized around their products, their distribution, and not anymore around the customer. So this sounds very obvious. You are going with the service van to meet your customers in their homes to see them. You'd be surprised how few C-level executives actually make this a priority for them in many, many big companies. It's starting to shift, but there are still so many that rely on their teams, rely on their data to do it. So what is the most surprising thing that you learned recently from the customer visits, or maybe like reconfirming what you already knew, but now it's more top of mind? Like what is some of that experience that gives you that you can't get in your office? And I'm asking about some of the obvious things, but again, in practice, it's hard. You got to get out there. You got to talk to your customers. You got to read the room, see who they are as a whole person. Like, can you speak to what would be a surprising thing that you learned from those visits, or something that was reconfirming what you believed?
I think one of the things you realize is you quite quickly can get into talking to yourselves in a business. So whether, you're in Nike and you're talking about sport and you're using all the acronyms and things that relate to that, or you're in technology. Technology is probably the worst perpetrator of this, right? So we can talk a lot in tech specs because actually we're quite proud of that. Tech is the proof point that we've enhanced what we can do. One of the things I think you learn, and it, again, might be obvious, but you really see, is when you're talking to people in their homes, you can see what they get and don't get by the way we communicate. And so in particular, when we're talking in tech specs, they do not get it. And so that really just kind of reinforces the need to talk about benefits and to work back into, if someone needs to know the tech that provides that benefit, we can talk about that. But that's actually not that important. And then to just, I think, often I'd say where they've gotten lost if they've gotten lost in a journey, where you'll hear it live there in terms of moving between channels. You hear some of that there, but we usually can see that with the data actually even before you go in. And then 3, it's like I said, because we're also not direct, both being in customers' homes, but also being in our channel partners, like with our other partners and in their channels. I think then you can see how you're showing up versus what you planned, and then the reality of what's being delivered. It's really important. And then you can use that to think about both how we work with those partners, but how we change our training and our tools to make sure that how we're showing up is actually closer to what we imagined. And I think you get all those pieces as well. I think, hopefully not surprising, but you also get the things they love. I think we're so busy often solving problems that we forget sometimes to focus. I know it sounds funny. We focus on it at the first bit, but then after that, certainly in these roles, you get into how do you fix pain points and solve all the things that aren't going well. But you get reminded of the things they love, like why they love your brand, why they love your product, what you've done for them in the past. And I think that is a really good reinforcing message to, it is right to be investing behind the things, investing behind the brand. And actually, maybe we aren't talking and reminding people about some of those things that we do know are great, and some of the use cases that people are coming up with that we, others might want to know about. So I think there's also a really good positive reinforcement side when you're so busy out there trying to solve problems that you get from interacting with consumers, which helps you, I think, stay energized and go back to the beginning of why are you here and why are you working with this brand that is amazing and that has been pioneering, innovation and using tech to solve everyday problems for a long time.
So let's talk about tech a bit, because you're right. Like when we put the product or the technology first, then you get very technical and your customers will lose you regardless of what you're trying to achieve, even if it's good for them. I had John Cutler on the show a while back, and he also said, like, in most organizations, product is just feeding the beast, right? Just ship it, deliver it, the agile release trains. I don't know how they're organized in Samsung, but How do you make sure that you're collaborating with your peers in product and technology to make this voice of the customer like traverse and make sure that we're not product first or technology centric, which can be very hard in a technology first business like Samsung, I can imagine.
I think Samsung does a fantastic job of taking insights. Like we've got global research centers, design centers, and insight centers that feed up into our R&D. So I feel really good about the things that are being inputted into the amazing technology that's coming down. To your point, I feel like the danger sometimes can get lost in because they've used because the magic then comes in how you've technologically solved it, then that ends up being the way some of it gets communicated both down to us and then out to the customer. As I said, so for us, I think the challenge is just making sure that, that two parts of Samsung kind of understand each other, which is the technologically feat and the innovation is amazing. That doesn't mean that's the way we need to communicate it. So I was saying, so that's actually I think that's the kind of the hardest part of our business, not that the solutions, because the solutions are great. And one of the things I've been so proud of in being in this company is that I think the approach the business has taken for a long time on AI has been a real, how do we use it to enable things that we know our customers need, like a real problem solver mentality around it, rather than the approach I think that some of the other players have taken. And that means that we have innovatively been able to come up with solutions that serve productivity, creativity, and connectivity in a real way across the whole platform this year. So I'm really proud of how they've done that. The trick then is making sure we can communicate that and continue to, as you said, provide the feedback back up, because there's so much we can do. Which features do we prioritize earlier as we start to release the next levels of capability, and they get those signals back from us. So that is one of the things we do. And one of the ways we do it the loudest, frankly, is through the communication we develop and then we share it back up. And that's very insight driven. So whenever we're developing our communications and our marketing, we're ingesting and creating new insights that feed that, and we're sharing that back up globally.
When did the role or the need of the role of a chief customer officer rise? Because it's a new phenomenon. A lot of companies are now setting up the CCO role. You are here now almost a year?
Year and a half almost, yep.
Year and a half. So
in
a lot of
role
things
a year,
have changed
yeah.
in the role a year. So how does that come to be? Like, what goes into this decision? Because it seems obvious, like a business is only existing because it has customers. Everyone should be caring about the customer. And yet it is important to have a CCO role. How do you think that came to be? Or how does something think about the importance of the role?
It's really interesting because I think it's one of those roles, again, that will probably come and go. So I have always been in, and I'll tell you why. It's not because it's not important now, but I've always been in roles that I feel like my job is to remove the need for the role by making the whole organization take on that way of working. And so prior to this, it was omnichannel. So at Nike, I ran omnichannel after I ran the retail business here in the UK and Ireland. And the goal there was to really kind of turbocharge that transformation within the organization, to think and build the capabilities, both systematically, like with technology, but also like the functional muscles and way of working across that. And the idea being at some point, you don't need that function anymore, but actually all the parts of the organization and how you're organized will actually solve for that. Inherently, omni-channel is the way we now do business, whereas 10 years ago, it was multi-channel, right? So you shouldn't need as much of a function that's driving the strategy around it. I do think in some ways maybe the customer officer will be that way. You'll need different, and maybe it will come up, or maybe more the evolution will be what parts need to fit into it at a given time. But I think because the pace of technology change is so fast right now, and the demands of the customer are really quite high and multidimensional now. The complexity of that does require someone in a role with a number of functions thinking about it to support the rest of the organization and moving in that way. And frankly, and to support the CEO, who is ultimately the chief customer officer, and doing that and keeping that in mind. And so I said, I don't know whether, I said this it will probably rise, and then maybe it won't exist in 5-10 years, or it'll exist in a different form. But I think it is that kind of confluence of technological change, customer demand, and so many channels that we need to work seamlessly today that really require having more another person at the operating board and at the C-suite to be that customer in the room, and then driving functions alongside often, a tech like a CTO, and also people that are doing some of more of the pure operational pieces, like in the CS side of it potentially, right? So I think definitely now, I think it makes sense. I would have said 10 years ago, your chief customer officer was your CEO, and you could run it by function, right? And so that's my interpretation of it. So let's see if in a few years or 5 years I can work myself back out of a job because we've created that seamlessly into the way the rest of the business is organized, right?
Right, because traditionally organizations are organized by silo, but then we create a new silo, which we call customer experience, and then, we just move the problem somewhere else, but still not someone is responsible for aligning all these different functions. So,
and that's your thing. That's the biggest thing I say is like, the biggest thing I don't want to happen and shouldn't is that because this role exists, I am the only person responsible for the customer. In fact, that's the opposite of what you need to have happen when a role like this comes in, and you have to work quite hard to make sure that isn't the case.
Do you have to work hard on your level to align everyone with the customer, or is it more like instilling a culture of customer centricity, training people, upskilling them, teaching how to be thinking about the whole customer and their emotional reality that are important to Samsung? Or is it more on the horizontal level? There are ways that you are currently working to get everyone to understand it from the customer perspective. Like, what is the main part of the role there?
I think it's both, right? And I hate to say that. I think one is everyone implicitly understands that the customer is key. I think then how to bring that to life is the piece that I think is important to keep articulating and aligning at a senior level and prioritizing the actions that we're taking. And then at the, throughout the organization, then it is about culturally instilling a way of thinking, a way of working, and a set of KPIs, and metrics that support always having the customer in mind rather than just looking at, more traditional metrics like sell out or profit and margin, right? Where you miss the nuances or traffic, like where you miss the nuances of what's happening actually with the customer. That's why you need to work at both levels. Nobody will disagree when you put up a set of principles that say, let's work back from the customer, let's increase their benefit, right? But it's how you bring that to life, I think, that you have to help the business align behind.
Well, when do people start to disagree? Because yes, the principles are easy to agree with, right? There's this famous quote from like 80% of business leaders say they're customer-centric, but only 8% of customers agree. But where does it start to break down? When do the principles start to hurt? Can you give an example of when that breaks down?
Yeah, I mean, I imagine that kind of it's in the obvious parts where budgets get cut. So then how do you think about how you spend the rest of your money? Sales targets are, high, let's say, and say demand softens in an area, right? And so it's in all those pressure point moments where it's important to try to figure out how you can use a customer-centric approach to solve the problem rather than do the simple kind of thing, which is cut let's say cut investment in a program that you are doing to improve a pain point. And I think those are the moments. I think being ready in those moments for how do you help solve the problem and continue to keep the customer in the center of that conversation is the key. That's the executional challenge, isn't it? I think everybody can agree to something up front, and that's when the pressure hits. And then also, it's really important. Our job is to build the use case, right, and the proof case that it pays. And so I'd say I'm not just looking externally. It's like we need to make sure that we're delivering ROI and we can demonstrate to people that the work we're doing is paying off. And that's the job we need to continue to work on as I said, customer officers or marketing people or CS people or insights people. Show the value and show it in a really compelling way. And that's a lot of what I spend time helping people around the business do.
I love that you bring up the ROI topic. It's the hairy one for many customer-centric leaders, because it's hard to quantify at first. Like as soon as you have the proof points on the board and the company starts to shift around and starts to appreciate being customer-centric at all these levels, at all these decisions, it's tough to do this. So how do you think about ROI? And I have to ask, like, what's your take on NPS? Because, there's many ways on it. I have an opinion about it, but curious to hear like your general take on NPS. But more importantly, how do you think about the ROI of customer centricity, how to measure it, how to impact it, how to help, let's say, demand softens in a certain area? When your sales leader comes to you and says, Deborah, we need to talk because you probably have the answers to my problem and we need to do it. How do we measure it? And the ROI of customer centricity, or the ROI of being customer obsessed, is hard to set up at first. How do you think about measuring that and quantifying that? And I'm also curious to hear your take on NPS.
No, it's a great question. I think that there isn't one metric that we can use. I think that we end up using a whole mix of them depending on the area, in part, as I said, because our route to market can be complex. Things that help you understand the overall lifetime value of a customer and can you enhance that, metrics that help you do that are quite key to doing these customer-centric, focused investments. I think also things that can help you understand how satisfied and what the current sentiment is of your customers are also key, because you can show, I think, as you look over time, you can show the leading and lagging impact of a lot of those movements, and so I think that's some of the ways that we look at that and continue to have that conversation internally, and then in different touch points, there's more relevant metrics. NPS as a whole, as you kind of go into, it's a bit of a blunt instrument, and I think it can easily be manipulated, to be honest. One of the challenges I find is if you want the data you get back to be really actionable, you often need more information than NPS and what you get through those NPS surveys. And so I think one of the things we often wrestle with is wanting the more actionable bit and then not having the NPS, which is the traditional metric that most people are used to seeing. And frankly, even our, globally, they look at for us as a UK subsidiary. So I'm probably with you. I don't know where you are on that, which is it's a bit of a blunt instrument tool that we do use here, but I definitely feel like we have to use complementary measures in order to get the full picture of what we need to actually have actionable insights to move.
Yeah, I like your definition of being a blunt instrument. And I think that's also true. The problem with NPS is not necessarily the instrument itself. It will be gamed. It will be used to people's advantage because a lot of the bonus payments for people in certain roles are tied to NPS performance. And I think that is what makes it hard to rip it out, because there are not many people who agree like it's the perfect metric. I don't think there are. Even the creator itself said like, yeah, I don't know what we created here. But I like what you're saying. It's like you need a few other indicators to understand how we're doing. And you need way more data, way more insight into what people are saying to make it actionable, which is where maybe like the customer journey comes in and your operational metrics come in, and combining these data together will give you a more accurate sense. But I want to touch on what you said before, which was like leading and lagging indicators. What are the leading indicators you're looking for when you think about satisfaction? Like that's the hard thing. Lagging indicator is easy. We can look back. But what are the leading indicators that you typically look for when thinking about customer satisfaction?
Well, it's interesting, as I mentioned as we started around some of this tools we have, like the connected living and the software platform we have also around, with mobile phones, how people sometimes are using just a small percentage of the capabilities. So those are areas that we look at where we know if customers are using more of the potential of the product, they are more satisfied generally. And so we look to see for customers that have given us that permission and are part of the Samsung's account holders and have signed up to things like SmartThings, we look to see how they're engaging with the capabilities, the various functionality, and try to offer them tools and suggestions to how to get more out of the product. So that's like for us, it would be a leading indicator of if someone isn't, and again, funny enough, sometimes, though I'm proven wrong, they're still very satisfied to use the 1% of the capability of the product. But, fundamentally, we think if they could use more of the capability, they will be happier, and generally that is the case. So we then use that actually to help tailor, for example, our post-purchase communications through a life cycle to help with that. And we also use that to influence how we might market in the coming quarter, and also what we do in our direct channels to bring those benefits to life and make it easier. And also our CS channels. So how do we make it easier for people to learn how to use them, whether it be, suite of digital tools to other tools. So that's one of the ways that we can engage. And a great example of that is, as we've rolled out AI across our mobile platform and our mobile devices this year, we've also offered that capability up to people to download on their older devices. And in the UK, we've seen like 4 million people already download that new UI that gives you those new features and benefits, which for us is a great leading indicator of they've seen and we've communicated the benefits of that UI quite well. We've seen high adoption in the people who bought the new models this year, but now it's going back and people are adopting it in the older models that they're holding, and using some of those tools, which we know are real game changers for people who are, doing creative work, because you've got an amazing photo editing suite in your pocket now, which you never used to have, or whether they're running a business and running a home like me, where you've got these amazing tools to do like Notes Assist and transcribe your meeting and send summary notes, 1 minute after you're finished, versus having to spend another half hour doing that. So those are quite good in our space. It's one example of where we'd get a leading indicator.
And it's ever evolving, right? We're reaching a new plateau of customer expectations, and then we need to beat it again, because these kind of technologies will be obvious 10 years from now.
As you say, and I'm picking up perhaps the less obvious, the obvious ones, through our CS channels, like where are we seeing people ask questions? The great thing with the tools you have today is you can use technology to quickly surface the key words and the key areas. So you can keep on top of that quite quickly now. Whereas I think it used to take a lot of data mining to get those pictures in the past. So I think we're quite happy with how we can deploy technology to help us there now.
Is there an emphasis also on the channel partners? Because this is the end consumer interacting with your devices, thinking about the role they play. Like I can imagine you learned a few things on Starbucks, where there was a huge emphasis on employee experience and what it was like working at Starbucks. Like, how are you thinking about the role the channel partners ultimately plays into customer satisfaction?
Yeah, it is really key. So one of the things we've done, so in my team, is actually built more of what we call like a group that helps work with our channel partners across the business. So we obviously dealt with them in each of our divisions before. And one of the big focuses there is really on making sure that the communication and training that we can do across the portfolio, and the efficiency of how we manage, how we show up in that grows. So we have put in as a kind of a cross-connecting layer to really add emphasis and focus to that.
So what does it look like in practice? You mentioned like they previously were belonging to the different divisions, everyone at their own channels.
Yeah, and that still exists, and it's really important, right? Because a lot of times when a customer shops in an electronic retailer, for example, they do shop by category. Like they go in and they're looking for a TV, or they go in and they're looking for something in the mobile or computing area. And so it is really important that we have those relationships and we show up really well in each of those areas. But what we have found is there are more opportunities now to talk about how our technology works across the portfolio, and also some of the leveling up with the new AI capabilities and features is true across our entire portfolio. So actually we've brought together some more of the training, some more of the communications tools, and some more cross-category experiences into the store in the last year than we've had before. And so that's some of the ways we're tackling that. And then we just, it also, as my team ends up, we can meet with the different categories that show up at a particular retailer and align on the big things that we all want to move forward that year together, and then show up, I think, as one much more powerfully than we did when we just went only divided. I think you need both in order to make that happen.
If you had a magic wand and could wave it right now, looking 5 years into the future, like all these steps that you're taking, your team is taking, is building up to a whole new type of business, it sounds like. So let's say you have a magic wand today, and one of the problems that you need to tackle, one of the challenges that you are facing or will face or likely will have still to do is going to go away. Which would it be?
What will go away? Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly I think the question of using technology to automate and solve certain problems. Not that we have that question, but sort of, is it worth investing, I think, in technology in some of the areas that we put forward? I think that question will go away because it will become so obvious that we, can't keep up if we don't. So I'd say that's one. And again, I don't face a lot of that here. I think it's just a prioritization exercise. Also, I think it's right now, a lot of people you're probably seeing is we're not scaled yet. Again, it's because the technology and capability is evolving. We're not scaled yet. So I think right now you're running a lot of things more as proof of concepts and in subscale manner. And I assume that will go away. We'll be able to scale it with more authority and permission across it. I mean, marketing automation is a perfect example of that, right? Where you can use your feedback and your user data and AI to really enhance how you communicate and drive everything from lead gen and B2B to personalized messages and B2C. And we do that. And I think a lot of organizations are doing that in pockets. We're not doing that at scale yet. So I think that will be helpful. I won't be running two different ways of working at that point. What else will go away? It's a really great question. I don't know. What's your thought? What else will go away?
So let me build on what you said on the personalization or like the marketing automation at scale. What I would like to go away is all the noise around this. If I could wave a magic wand, then we would truly be tapped into our customer pains, what they need, or the things that they are perceiving as like working well or successful, so that when we communicate something with them, it's authentic. So I think it's not about scaling using AI to send more and then, personalize all of it so Deborah is getting that specific message, but to really like do less, but do more right things, do more things that really move the needle. And I think that is exciting. Like if we can move that away out of it, because now it's like, let's just throw spaghetti at the wall and AI is just making a lot more spaghetti, where we will see what sticks. That will shift around to, no, we actually know there's only a few things that we need to do this year for this specific customer. That's exciting to me. So if I could wave something to go away, it's like, all the BS that's going on in all this AI-enabled communication that today is missing the mark on so many fronts.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I think it's, as you've seen, it's evolving so quickly, its capability. I think we should be able to get to a place where the volume, as you said, it's like it's quality over quantity as we move forward, the capability that will come. Yeah. That would be great.
I mean, today
definitely.
You need to visit your customer in their homes, and that still has a place in time. But what if you could visit all your customers because you have the data and there's an AI that helps you to talk to you when you're at your desk and they have all the data and representing the customer in a very meaningful way that is accurate and high quality. So that could be.
What's great though is we're already seeing that we can use, for example, like if someone goes into a customer home, if they have connected that product to our SmartThings platform, we can actually problem solve digitally and for them directly quite a few things that you wouldn't have been able to do. We can much better make sure, when the service person comes and they don't have the part they need, like that sort of goes away. So those are some of the pain points that go away when you're more data connected and your devices are actually smarter. They can actually, help you self-solve faster, because everyone, the washing machine goes down in a household with children, or just any group of people that need number of people that need clothes, right? It's not a great thing, but we can solve that faster than ever before and smarter than ever before, which I think is to your point, another thing that comes with this, not just marketing, but with the more connected, more intelligent devices and an ecosystem that connects back to our CS team and to the, fleet that we send out on the street to people's homes, right?
So solving more real customer problems rather than solving marketing productivity issues with AI. That's your magic wand.
Yeah, it's one of them. I mean, I do think you're gonna need it across a number of functions. I certainly would love the volume of emails I get to go down, because most of them are not relevant to me that I still get today. And again, that on the marketing side. But, every once in a while you do get emails that are really, or a form of social communication that is a marketing tool that is really spot on. And I appreciate those because I feel like they know me and they've appropriately connected with me at the right time. And so again, I think AI and marketing automation could help us a lot with that.
So, Deborah, this was a fantastic conversation. If people listening to this episode and think like, I am actually the CCO in my company, but I don't have the title, or we need to have a CCO in our leadership team, can they reach out to you? Where can they find you? What's the easiest way to connect with you?
Absolutely. Just grab me on LinkedIn. I think that's probably the easiest way. I am learning from every one of the interactions I have with people like yourselves and other people who are in customer facing or customer evangelist, customer officer roles. So I'm always up for having a conversation and hearing how other amazing people out there are solving their customer problems and how I also implement new ideas in what we're doing. So I very much welcome that.
Yes, I will put your LinkedIn in the show notes. Please don't email Deborah because that's probably not the best way to reach out as we heard, but we're going to put LinkedIn in the show notes. Deborah, thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope we can speak again. All right, and that's it. Thank you so much for listening. If you found this valuable today, don't forget to subscribe to the Experience Edge on your favorite podcast channel, leave a review, and share it with your team. I'd be delighted. Today's episode was brought to you by Daydo, the AI journey management solution for enterprise. To have an edge on your business strategy and to know why your customers do what they do, visit daydo.com and explore more resources to accelerate your customer experience game. And remember, the journey to creating customer-centric impact never ends, and here's always a new edge to discover in doing things differently. Next week, new episode. Until then, keep pushing the edge and stay inspired. See you in the next episode.